Hi, I'm Maria Theohara Silvello, Sews on social media. Welcome back to Sober 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style. Grab a cuppa and relax with us.
Go, I want to be like you when I grow up. And then I say, oh well, I'm still waiting to grow up. I loved dressing up as a little girl, had my own dressing up books, which actually it was the start of my 50s journey, I suppose, because my sister's 18 years older than me, and I used to have her cast-offs.
Does that sound like how you started your love of sewing vintage clothes? That's Joanna Chamberlain talking about her childhood dressing up in clothes from her sister's cast-offs. In last week's episode, Joanna talked about her life as an extra. In today's episode, Joanne shares her advice about sewing your own vintage looks, no matter what your shape, and there is no barrier to sewing and wearing the vintage clothes that you love so much. Vintage_Jo_sew_and_sew is where you can find Joanna on Instagram every day. Thanks for coming back to listen to another Sober 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style. Sew Over 50 intersects with all communities. We're a community that is so over ageism, and together we positively lead being visible in the sewing world. Many thanks to our Patreon supporters as their monthly contributions keep this podcast going for free. I hope you'll join them in supporting this podcast. You know, you've been really busy up until this week because you've had
Minerva 25th birthday party and the dressmaker's ball.
Yep.
They were within a week of each other. And a few weeks before that, I had Goodwood Revival, which is to anyone not in the UK. It's a big vintage event we have here. Personally, it's one of the best, I think. There are a few quite good ones that I haven't been to, so I can't judge on those. But Goodwood Revival, it's based at a racetrack near Chichester. So there's something for everyone. They race vintage cars. I think the actual racetrack was actually an action from late 40s to the 60s. So that tends to be the era they have people dress up. It's not that you wouldn't get let in. I mean, some people don't dress up at all, which is fine. They just go to see the stuff, but most people do. Because if you're into vintage cars, there's the racing and they have big displays. And if you're into fashion, there's the fashion, they have the best dressed, beautiful things going around. The last couple of years, they've had a new thing called Revive and Thrive, which is a stage and people talking about how they incorporate reviving and thriving clothes. There's some great people give talks on there. And there's dancing, there's loads of marquees around. You really need to go for more than one day because you won't get round it. There's an airfield. They have actors going around it, dressed up and doing things. There's a great couple of char ladies that go around. They're so funny. So I went for the 3 days and I made 3 outfits for that. It's been a bit mad.
You would have made 3 outfits for the Goodwood Revival. You made a dress and an amazing coat for the Minerva 25-year event. As well as another amazing dress for the dressmaker's ball. You did have a shrug.
Yes, I made a little cloak for the dressmaker's ball, very last minute and last bits, because late September here and you never know with the evenings whether it's going to be chilly or not. It's a very simple coat. And then, as I say, for the Minerva one, I'd made a dress in stretch velvet, similar to the dress I made for dressmaker's ball, completely different fabrics. The dressmaker's ball was Dupion silk and the other one was stretch velvet. Different properties completely, so they give a different look. I had to line the velvet with calico and quite robust interfacing so it didn't stretch in the bodice because it was originally strapless, but I decided to add some straps, especially as Mr. Patrick Grant from Sewing Bee Judge was there. And then I thought about, it's going to be even later. And originally I was going to make a cloak, and then I just happened to come across this coat in my news feed for a 1920s Poirot coat. And I thought that's the one because the dress with the petals that I had a very Art Deco feel about it, 1920s. So I made that coat and it was amazing. It's quite simple. It's just 2 pieces and it comes over. When I cut it out, I thought, how on earth does this work? I looked at it and thought, I've no idea. This is like a challenge on Sewing Bee because you don't know where the arms are. And it all came together. And it's beautiful because it just folds where all the velvet drapes, and it's just beautiful. And I'm going to make another one. I mean, I have worn that just over trousers. I wore it to the Chanel exhibition at V&A the other day over trousers and a polo neck. I think it's one of those useful things.
If people want to see you, because this might be the first time they've heard you on a podcast and not gone to your Instagram account,
It will be.
what's the name of your Instagram account so people can have a look at the videos and the photos?
Okay, it's vintage underscore Joe underscore so underscore so. So vintage Joe so and so, but underscore in between each word. I'm also on TikTok, but I have no idea what I'm doing on that. But I'm told it's the way to go by the youngsters. And on TikTok, I'm the same.
You make your clothes now. Have you always sewn your own clothes?
Not always. I learnt to sew when I was 13 at school. It's those days in the 70s when girls did domestic science, sewing, and maybe art if they were lucky. And the boys did woodwork and metalwork. And I wish sometimes now that I'd also learnt woodwork because it'd be very handy for making cabinets for my sewing room. You know, stuff I made in those days, I didn't wear much because it always looked so homemade.
Mhm.
We've got YouTube and access to the internet. You can find anything now. So if you get stuck on anything, I used to have a book, I still got it. Mum and Dad bought it for me in Christmas 1972, Better Homes sewing book. That's how I know when she bought it because
Oh,
it's got it written in the cover. And that was the extent of where we could look things up. We either looked in a book we had or go to the library. But now you can look things up and YouTube tutorials, for patterns and stuff. I seem to get much better finish, whether it's because I've ventured onto more challenging patterns. I don't know. I gave up for 30 years sewing when I had the kids. I have to take my hats off to all those mums out there who still managed to sew with little ones. I don't know how they did it. And I lost interest completely. When I did come back to it, I started sewing, and now I hardly ever buy anything. I think most of my wardrobe is me made now. Yeah.
and with your me mades in your wardrobe, are a lot of those made from contemporary patterns or do you also source vintage patterns?
A lot are from reissued or indie patterns where they concentrate on vintage style. Something I wore for Goodwood last year, which was a Madame Grey, I think it was 1957 pattern, and it was only £5. And I thought, gosh, because, vintage patterns go for a fortune now.
Yeah.
It was my size, none of the vintage patterns are my size. So I had to have it. And it was the old sort of fashion patterns from the 50s that weren't printed markings on it. They were perforated.
Yes.
It was hard to tell what was perforations and what was just wear and tear because it was in a sorry state. And I did have to redraft a lot of it. But yeah, I made that and it was lovely and well, it was authentic. But the main problem I have is I'm very curvy. And even when I was slimmer, the vintage patterns, they just don't, they had different figures, they come out of the war, they were just slimmer all around. Sometimes you see their waists or some of these, vintage clothes, and they're like, that wouldn't fit on my leg. Tiny, tiny. I have made several things from original vintage patterns, and there are a few people that resize them. I mean, I made a Pake Moo recently by Submersive Femme, and that was a Polynesian dress. Now, I did two. I did one. Usually they're in sort of Hawaiian style fabrics. I did an English version in roses, and then I did another one that was a bit more tropical. It was a really nice pattern. I really liked that. If you do a bit of research, you'll find a lot of indie pattern people are doing that out there.
It's making it a lot easier for you to find the patterns that you would like to sew and wear.
Yes, and I've got a bit more confident these days. I use a lot of charm patterns as well. I always followed a pattern religiously, but now I sort of, oh, I don't like that skirt so much on me. I might like it on someone else, but it doesn't suit me. So, I mean, the dresses I made for the dressmaker ball and the Minerva one, I sort of made more petals, which was quite challenging, to be honest. Yeah, and I think you have to go for it sometimes. Trouble is, when you go to something where you've got a load of dressmakers going, it doesn't happen normally. You go to a wedding, there's very, very rare that you're going to find someone in the same dress as you, because
Yeah,
especially for me, because down south where I live, not many people sew, but you go to something like the dressmaker's ball or Minerva party, of course we're all doing the same thing. Everyone puts their own little take on it. It's lovely.
it's very nice to see that pattern on a different body and used with different fabrics.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, different completely. It's nice when you go to these events because we all have a different take. I always go for vintage, but that doesn't mean that's right, because not everyone's into vintage. And I love it. I love seeing everybody's take on how they interpret the event and what they wear and their own personal style. It's great to see, great to see everybody's take on it. It's lovely.
yeah, it is lovely. When did you discover the Sober 50 community on Instagram?
I've tried to think about this because I've been part of it for quite a while. I think what happened was when I find an outfit, a pattern, I think, oh, I'll put the hashtag in and see who's made this and what it looks like made up, because the pattern covers, they never look like they
No.
do on a real person, do they? And I think somewhere something came up, and I sort of looked on it because there's a lady similar to me, and the hashtag was so over 50. And because I thought, hang on, that sounds like it might be my bag. So I clicked on it and then found from that the so over 50 community and the Instagram page. And yeah, been part of that, following it ever since. They featured me in a few things, and yeah, it's great. Great to see so many of us because we love sewing.
As you said, when you go to events, you see people wearing the pattern that you might be in, but with a
Yeah,
different interpretation.
yeah,
When you go to
absolutely.
Sober 50, you see that as well, but more often.
Yeah,
Yeah, you don't
yeah,
need
yeah,
an
yeah.
event.
I love seeing sewing on young people, but it's not what I'm going to look like in it. And what I like about the Sew Over 50 is anything goes. It's not like in my mum's day when you got to a certain age and you dressed in a certain way. I never think, well, sometimes I do think, oh, is this too young for me? And then I think, oh, blow it, let's go for it. And do you know, I get so many compliments from young people. They say, if I post it on one of the sewing pages on Facebook or something, they go, I want to be like you when I grow up. And then I
Oh,
say, oh, well, I'm still waiting to grow up. I love dressing up as a little girl, had
yeah.
my own dressing up box, which actually it was the start of my 50s journey, I suppose, because my sister's 18 years older than me. And I used to have her cast offs. And I had some of the most beautiful clothes in my dressing up box that were her dancing dresses. And,
Oh,
you know, if only I had them now. To think I used to walk around the garden. I'm still that little girl. I'm still that little girl that loves dressing up and making beautiful dresses just so I can dress up in them. So I don't think I'm ever going to grow up. I don't want to, really.
no. And you don't have to either.
No, no.
It sounds like you're a really good role model to a lot of people.
Well, I don't know, but I hope so. I hope so, yes. I get a lot of compliments, in the groups and stuff. And it makes me sad, somebody goes, oh, I'd love to wear that, but I'm too old, I'm too fat, or no, go for it. I saw something yesterday, I think it was. Don't save your coveted fabric for an outfit when I get slim, I'm going to wear this. Make it now and wear it because you'll feel amazing. And I thought that is brilliant advice, because how many of us have this coveted fabric in our stash and think, oh no, that'd look lovely if I was slim, or the occasion. So yes, I mean, I can't talk. I got some silk doopy on. It's sitting in my stash that I was going to make an outfit for Goodwood Revival about 3 years ago, and I still haven't made it. But next year, I said I'm definitely going to use that, because with the original pattern I had in mind, which I want to base on a Lillian 1950s suit. There, I've said it now. I've got to do it.
It's documented now, it'll be out there.
Yes.
What's coming up for you when it comes to vintage events that you're going to be making something amazing again?
Bridgetown Ball is my next. This is going to be totally different for me. It's based on Bridgerton's. They're brilliant. I met a Richie Walsh, who was a competitor on Sewing Bee, and I think it was 22 last year. He was at Minerva party and he told me about this. He dresses Regency all the time. He wanted to try on my cocoon coat because he loved it and he looked fabulous in it. And he told me, and I thought, oh, this is a challenge. I have made period outfits before. I used to do steampunk, so they're sort of bit Victorian.
Yeah.
So I felt, yeah, let's do this. So I haven't decided on an outfit yet, like Jane Austen style or Georgian Queen Charlotte in Bridgerton. So I've got to decide on one of those styles and go for it. It ran last year. It's totally inclusive. I've got a few people who are over 50 coming. So if anybody wanted to come, they don't feel you're going to be the only over 50s because there's quite a few over 50s. Their motto is pride, not prejudiced. And I think it's going to be a fun evening like all the others I've been on. There's raffles and dancing and a few other surprises, he tells me. They have an Instagram page, Bridgetown Ball, which
Yeah.
I think is all one word on there. Some of these vintage events, people can get very, very pickety. Oh, that's not, not correct. Just go with the feel. It doesn't matter if you don't get it historically correct. If you want to go full hog and do it historically correct, fine. And even upcycled outfits, they're fine with, that which if you want to add an extra challenge. But yeah, the main thing is that you're going to have fun, you're going to meet people. What I found about these sewing events is you walk into a room of complete strangers. A dressmaker's ball last year, I didn't know one person. I walked in, and by the end of the evening, I had a whole load of new friends. These events, you go along and you can talk about sewing all night if you want to, and people's eyes just light up. I'm used to them glazing over, thinking, will she
Exactly.
ever shut up? It's like, and they keep asking you questions about your sewing, and it's wonderful because you've all got that shared interest.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a really, really nice event. And Richie is lovely. He's a really lovely guy. He's one of the organisers. The other, I think, is Cheshire Corsetry, where I think you get the tickets on Luna Hun. It's being held in the Midlands here near Telford. That would be great fun.
And when will that be held next year?
Saturday, May the 18th.
Oh,
So
lovely.
you've got a bit of time to get your outfit together. There's lots of stuff out there if you search. There's a Jane Austen festival in Bath and they do Regency patterns. Yeah, if you search up Regency patterns, Georgian patterns, it'll come up in your newsfeed. There's a lot of independent companies. People are quite into it because the Jane Austen festival in Bath is a really big event.
From the sounds of the details that you know and the look on your face when you talk about it, I can see that you're already thinking about what you're going to be making.
My brain is a bit bamboozled with ideas at the moment. The Regency look is completely different. I've done Georgian with my extra workers, I think I told you, with the old panniers out the side. It's great when you need to go to the loo because you have to go inside ways. I've done bones. My outfits for Minerva and Dressmaker's Ball and Goodwood were all bones,
Yeah.
but I haven't actually made a corset yet.
Any last words for listeners who are thinking of making their own vintage style garments? So, where to get patterns, what fabric to look for, those sorts of things.
There are quite a few people on eBay and Etsy that have reissued patterns. You
Mhm.
find them on there. And if you go on Etsy, there's quite a lot of PDF patterns people have designed, reissued. Obviously, the big four have sections for vintage, and a lot of them are reissued, so they are original designs. I use quite a lot of charm patterns. Gertie bases her designs on original designs. There's how to do fashion. Her stuff is based on vintage. I mean, some of these are just vintage style, they're not true vintage.
Mm.
And fabric wise, you can get, if you search original fabric, but it's very expensive. Look up companies that do dead stock. There's a lot of vintagey designs. Study what some of the vintage modern designs are quite vintagey. I've seen a lot of people using old curtains, old
Yeah.
bedspreads,
Yeah.
stuff you can get from charity shops. They're all great ways of using it. And of course, environmental friendly, we're using up things that would go into landfill, which is the way we should be going more and more.
Yeah.
doing a bit of research on what sort of fabrics they used. They used in the 40s a lot of rayon, which there's different qualities obviously of rayon, but viscose is like a modern alternative to a lot of them. I made some 1940s dress for an event that's at a local castle here, Hever, in viscose chalet, and it was actually a modern design from Minerva. And I won best dressed, which was amazing.
Fantastic.
As long as you sort of got a bit of imagination, you can get there. And accessorize. It doesn't have to be true vintage accessories. A lot of things out there that vintage style. Know the look you want to go for, and it'll be out there on charity shops, thrift shop. Great
Yeah.
places to find this stuff.
Okay. Joe, you've told us a lot about the vintage looks that you make, the events that you go to, and all the effort that you put into the outfits that you wear. So I want to thank you for coming onto the podcast to tell us about what you do outside of sewing and how we can also benefit from your advice on how we can start our own journey, creating a look that we would like people to see that makes us comfortable in the body that we have now.
Thank you for having me. It's been great chatting with you, Maria. You're lovely. I hope people get a little bit of inspiration, maybe get out their comfort zone and do something they thought about doing but not done, and go for it.
And thank you for being such a role model, because it's always wonderful to see your photos crop up in the posts and in the stories every so often. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very kind.
Many thanks to Joanna Chamberlain for sharing her life as an extra in last week's podcast and in this week's episode about her vintage sewing advice. Feel free to share Joe's podcast with your sewing friends as well. This episode of Sew Over 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style was produced by me, Maria Theoharis, with permission of Joanna. Sound by bensound.com. If you want to provide a guest post for Sew Over 50 on Instagram, make sure you direct message Sandy and the editorial team. You can subscribe to Sew Organised Style podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sew Over 50 podcast archive, and if you can, consider supporting the production of this podcast on Patreon. We look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.